Hey guys, Worm the Conqueror here, and today I wanted to talk about a very interesting conversation. I noticed this kind of gaining traction over on Destiny's forums, and I figured it was probably about time that we talked about raid and dungeon weekly rotations, and whether or not they should be completely farmable or if they should remain on a weekly rotation basis. Now, of course, I want to know your thoughts on this. So go throw it down in the comments below and tell me your thoughts before we talk about this, because I kind of want to know where everybody stands on this before I offer my opinions on it. Um, at any rate, let's move on. Now, this has been gaining a lot of traction because a lot of players are frustrated that they have to wait I think it's 4, maybe 5 weeks before they can farm certain encounters. They can go in, of course, you can get your weekly reward, sorry, but that's it. Once you're done on that, you can't really, there's not a reason to do the raid outside of if you just love raiding, which I know there's some players out there that love raiding like that. I'm not one of them personally, however. Um, but the debate comes in, should they be farmable because of players' lack of time, okay, or because players don't like certain raids. Now, the background in this, lots of people are frustrated because they work. Most players are casual players. They don't have a lot of time to grind raids and dungeons whenever they want. So they have to kind of fit in a certain schedule. And so when a raid comes around once every 4 weeks or 4 or 5 weeks, it's very difficult for many players to get in and find the time to grind that out. They might be able to do like 3 or 4 runs in a week, but if they're having to wait 4 or 5 weeks to do that, they're struggling and they're frustrated. And I think they have every right to be. I think the players who don't get to raid very often do have the right to be frustrated that they have to wait to farm certain things. Um, However, I don't know if making all raids completely farmable is really a strong option. So I want to start off with the older raids. Last Wish being the one that comes to mind right off the top of my head, Garden of Salvation as well. In these older raids, I don't see many people farming them or really doing them in general. And this is a topic for another video as to why. I think it's because the weapons are a little out of date. But these are not raids that many people want to farm. I really don't see an issue with Bungie making the oldest raids farmable, completely farmable, 24/7 every week. I don't have an issue with Bungie having these raids be farmable to players, okay? Because the weapons and stuff that you can get from them, they suck. I'm not trying to be rude, okay? And I know some of them are good, but by and large, they do not compare to the current raid weapons that we have. And hell, I think a lot of them don't even compare to other legendaries that don't come from the raid. Look at some of look at the oldest raids that we have. In fact, um all but Vow of the Disciple and King's Fall have no stasis weapons in them. None whatsoever. And I think that that's, their dates, the age of these raids really shows in that. Now I know, they recently went back in and revamped not Vow of the Disciple, sorry. Um Deepstone Crypt weapons. I apologize, I can't think off the top of my head. But they've gone in and they've revamped Deepstone Crypt weapons to allow players to get new, fresh rolls. And they're going to be doing that in Lightfall with another raid. We don't know which one yet, but they have said that they're going to revamp an old raid. If I had to guess, I would say probably Last Wish. It's the biggest raid that Destiny's ever had, and it's really, really old. It needs new stuff now. But the old raids, I'm kind of getting off topic here. The old raids, I would agree, need to be farmable. However, there are some conditions. Number one, can you just sit and farm the same encounter over and over again? Should it require, certain playstyle, like, oh, you can farm it, but you have to do the entire raid in its completely, and that's the only way you can farm it. You can't farm certain encounters or something like that. I don't really know. I don't like the idea of locking a raid out um, by encounters. I think that, you know, raids should be events that players can farm certain encounters for so they can get certain weapons. So I don't think that, you know, if it's not the Last Wish, for example, week, you know, then you have to do the entirety of the Last Wish raid in order to you know, farm it again. I don't think that that's the way to go about it. But there are some raids where it's like, well, some raids like Deepstone Crypt is easy, relatively easy, I should say. You know, you can get a run in and get it done in 30 minutes. You know, so I think depending on the raid, there's different raids where it's like, okay, like it would be okay for some, not okay for others. You know, I don't really think that it would be appropriate to have, you know, no checkpoints in the raid. I think that if you're doing a raid, you should have checkpoints. But that's, you know, that's for the older raids. The newer raids are a little bit of a different story because their weapons are substantially more powerful, and their armor sets, you know, look arguably better, except the Warlock from Vow of the Disciple, which looks ugly. Sorry, Warlocks. However, the difference between the new raids and the old raids is really just, it's just time, you know. And who knows, maybe by the next expansion, next February, if that's when it's coming out, maybe Vow of the Disciples weapons will be incredibly out of date, you know. And I could see that happening, and that's why I think it's good that Bungie's going in here and revamping raids. But I don't know if letting players just infinitely farm them every single week is going to do it for the player base. Now the next thing, and this is arguably the most important thing as to why Bungie hasn't already done this, is players, if they were permitted, if players were basically allowed to play whatever raid they wanted as many times they wanted, you would have substantial droughts in content for certain raids. Think of something like Garden of Salvation. Garden of Salvation's roles are really mediocre at best. You know, I think the best weapon, in my opinion, from Vow of the Disciple is the Sacred Providence, because it can roll with rapid hit and kill clip. And now that's been kind of, you know, that's been outdated by Disparity and by the Vow of the Disciple pulse rifle. I forget the name of it. I was using it today and I forget the name of it. But if you divided the player base up by all the raids as much as you wanted, I don't think that you would ever realistically find a team to do Guard of Salvation. Okay, I really don't. You know, because everybody, number one, Garden of Salvation is so old. Garden of Salvation is, I say so old, like it's, you know, decades old. It's an old raid. I have a difficult time finding raid teams for it even now. Even when it is in the featured rotation, it's difficult to find raid teams. If you split it apart, okay, if you split it apart and make it so that, you know, people can farm whatever they want, I don't think you'd be able to find teams. I think that some of these raids would be nearly, if not impossible, to fill a fire team in. And I think that's the reason why Bungie has not allowed raids just be infinitely farmable. They like to have the weekly rotation because it's like, hey, you know, I know that Garden of Salvation's coming up, for example. You know, that's the one I used a second ago. Yeah, not many people are going to be playing it. However, because it's farmable, people who don't have god rolls for it are going to be in there more. And it's like, hey, well, I can't do, you know, I can't do Deepstone Crypt. I can't do Last Wish, like, you know, and I like raiding, might as well do Garden of Salvation, and maybe I get the god roll, you know, whatever weapon that I've always wanted from it. And I think that's the importance, or not the importance, sorry, that's the reason why Bungie has continued to separate the raids. Now, like I said, I know that for the, you know, for the casual player, it is frustrating and it is difficult because, you know, hell, maybe you are scheduled to work one week, you know, and you get one day to do whatever, you know, whatever raid is in rotation, and you really like that raid and you really want god rolls for it. You get one day and you don't get any god rolls, and then you have to wait 4 more weeks. And here's the thing, I feel the pain that many casual players have in regards to that. But ultimately, I do think that keeping these raids from being farmed infinitely every week, at least the newer ones, at least the newer ones, is important. Now, briefly back to Last Wish and Garden of Salvation. These raids are so old and out of date. I don't see an issue with it. In fact, I don't see an issue with the oldest few raids. Like once a raid hits, you know, what is Vow is, or not Vow, sorry, what is Last Wish? It's 5 years old. I think it's 5 years old. Once the raid hits like the 3-year mark, you know, and it hasn't got any weapon updates, mind you, it hasn't got any weapon updates, let it be farmable infinitely until it gets an update. You know, imagine this season we can infinitely farm Last Wish and Garden of Salvation. Okay, would that mean a lot of people are in it? No, absolutely not. Okay, would it mean that it's easier for certain players to get god rolls? Yes, and especially the god rolls from these raids, they're not really that great by any means. I mean, you know, when you think about, I don't know, Chattering Bone, for example, I think Chattering Bone is arguably the best. Let me think for a second. Yeah, I would say Chattering Bone is probably the best Last Wish weapon because it can get Outlaw and Rampage, which at this point is kind of a medium roll. You know, you got Feeding Frenzy, Rampage, which is arguably the better combo, but then you got things like, you know, Age-Old Bond, which has not, I mean, I wouldn't say any god rolls at all. The closest you might get is the curated roll with 4 times a charm and Rampage. You might get Dragonfly and Triple Tap. I mean, can you really even say that Dragonfly and Triple Tap is a coveted god roll? I can't. I wouldn't. I would say Outlaw. You know, maybe if it had Outlaw and Dragonfly, yeah, sure, why not? But it doesn't. It doesn't have any great, wonderful rolls, and that's why I think the older raids should be, you know, should have the option to farm them infinitely. Okay, because the like I said, god rolls that you get from these raids are not god rolls. They are outshined by literally every other, you know, every season after it. They're outshined by so much. Yeah, but that's, you know, that's kind of my thoughts on it. Raid and dungeon weeklies, you know, the older the content, the more farmable it should be. Definitely, I'd say, like I said, past 3 years, let it be completely farmable. Okay, every week you can get in there, you know, you get your 1 set of pinnacles. That's another thing. Pinnacles are a different story. I don't think that you should go and do a raid 50 times and get 50 pinnacles. Obviously not. You know, every raid currently, you can do it once a week. You get your pinnacles, and or I don't even think you get your pinnacles anymore, but you can get 1 set of weapons and armor from a raid per week if it's not the you know, the weekly one. But I think older raids should allow players to have the option to farm them so that players can get those old weapons, those old out-of-date weapons. I mean, because here's the thing, I don't see any harm in it. I don't see any harm in somebody, oh wow, I finally got this Age-Old Bond with Dragonfly and, like, I don't know, Zen Moment or something like that. Like, okay, like, sure, cool. It's not that good. You know, they'll get it, they'll use it, drop, you know, 200, 300 kills and realize, hey, it kind of sucks, you know? Anyways, that's just my thoughts on, you know, raid and dungeon weekly rotation farming. Like I said, I want to know what you guys think in the comments below. Like, do you think that it's appropriate to have, you know, all raids be completely farmable? Do you kind of agree with me that, you know, some raids should be farmable, some should not? I want to know what the community thinks. But anyways, hey, come check me out on Twitch, twitch.tv/thewormkeeper. We do this almost every day of the week. And y'all guys take care of yourselves. That's it for me. Bye for now.